Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, you're going to make sure you want to subscribe and hit that notification bell because this episode is going to blow your socks off. If you're like me, if you love business, but you also love sports, I love this book. I'm on my third iteration. This book is a game changer, rigging the game, and I love it. I love it. I love it. Brother, welcome to the show. I'm so blessed to be able to have you here.
Well, I'm not a super rah-rah guy, but man, that intro video got me fired up. So thanks for having me on, Richard.
Oh, I'm so blessed. And like our mutual friend Trey said, I got to have you on. I had to get your book. And once I got your book, I had to get you on. So my first question before we even get started, because I got a traumatic brain injury. If I don't remember it, it doesn't get done. What is your definition of resiliency?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the reality is, when I think about resiliency, I think about two words that come to mind: restraint and discipline. And so, to have resiliency, I think it requires both. Now, discipline to me is answering the question: would I be a disciple of myself? And whenever I think about that, it feels like a real gut punch. Would I be a disciple of myself? In other words, if a camera were to follow me around 24/7, would I want to watch that back, or would I want to show it to my mom? Man, is that a gut punch. So the more that we're a disciple of ourselves, that we'd say yes to that, I think the more resilient we are, because we don't have all this dissonance. The more that we're trying to be somebody else, the more that I think that creates this anxiety or just overall disconnect, because you know that you're not being authentic. You know you're being a fake. And so and that causes us, I think, to not do the things that we know we need to do. And then restraint, I get this language from Dr. Jeff Spencer, who's an amazing person. He's an Olympian himself. He's coached something like 50 other people to gold medals across a bunch of different disciplines. And he says that the champion's key word is restraint. In other words, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be faced with, things that we think we should do or we see everyone else doing, or maybe we just hit our highest month in revenue, or we just had a big event and the rest of the world is telling us we got to double down. And those are moments where we have to have restraint, where we need to pause, find a moment of sobriety, hopefully, and then decide what is the next best thing for us to do. And those two things, the more that you can exercise them together, the more I think resilient you're going to be as you face a lot of scrutiny and expectations. Those are the two tyrants that we face every day: scrutiny and expectations. And so
Tell us a little bit about where'd you grow up, where'd you come from, what kind of kid were you, and how did you become the man that you are today?
I grew up in a town just outside of Seattle called Renton, without the T if you actually grew up there. And it was a really, really blue-collar town, not too far outside of Seattle. But when I grew up, it was mostly folks who worked for Boeing, like machinists, in these plants. My dad is a journeyman machinist, and a lot of trees. It's since, because it's so close to Seattle, been kind of redeveloped and it's changed quite a bit. Really blue-collar town. I feel very, very fortunate to come from that background. To come from that blue-collar, be the first person in my family to go to college, because I learned so much about hard work and adversity from my dad, and from that type of situation where things just didn't come easy necessarily, although I didn't know that we didn't have much. I never felt that way. I had to overcome being a painfully shy kid with a speech problem and just terrible teeth. So kind of picked on a little bit, and just uncomfortable in my own skin. And so that took me I mean, I'm still working on that. I still get, especially coming out with this book, had to do a lot of self-promotion, and that I've gotten a bunch of attention from it. And you'd think like, oh, you must be so excited. You're getting all this attention. Like, actually, it makes me really uncomfortable. I'm happy that the book is resonating with so many people, and that's the outcome that I want. But at the same point, I'm still that shy, introverted kid, and so it's kind of an infinite game. This thing of life where you think you figure it out, and then you're like, no, I still have some things I got to work through.
So now, when I grew up in an abused household, and for me, books were my solace. Books saved me, and I think I'm reading. I got 15 books going right now, and one Audible book. And your book, I'm going on my third iteration. So, as you were coming up, being picked on and all that stuff, what was your solace? What was your go-to?
That's a good question. First off, I commend you. One of the things we teach in a certification program that we have is that if you aren't surrounded by the people that you want to know, books are the fastest way to get there, because you can read about the people that you aspire to be, and you can put yourself, not literally but figuratively, in that situation. My solace was probably, I got a lot of strength from my parents. They had really traumatic childhoods, so I got a lot of just encouragement from them. But I was always very strong academically, and so in a way, like, I could kind of always count on like focusing on whatever the school assignments might be.
Now, after high school, you went to college. What college did you go to, and why?
I went to a school called Seattle University, which is a Jesuit small school obviously in Seattle. And it ended up being the only school that I applied to. Again, I'm the first person in my family to go to college, so there's things I might do differently based off what I've learned along the way. But I fell in love with the campus, the size, and ultimately, I wasn't ready to live on campus. And so it's close enough to where I grew up that I could commute to school. So wasn't ready for University of Washington, which is like 3 miles down the road from where I went to college, because that's 40, 50,000 students to go there. And I knew that that would be too much for me.
So what did you major in college, and why?
I started college as a marketing major, and I did DECA, maybe familiar with that, the club. And that's where I really started to find a lot of confidence, actually, was in this DECA program, where ultimately I made it to nationals, and it required me to do a lot of presenting. And so I thought, okay, well, I really like this. And I was always the kind of cliche kid scheming on business ideas growing up. And so to me, it made sense that I would be a business major, and was just kind of biased by the DECA experience in marketing. Then I got in and was into my freshman year. I got a job at UPS, the big shipping company, as a finance supervisor. So I was managing a team of 20 people in a hub in Seattle, and but I was in charge. My boss was at the finance headquarters several miles away, and so I was responsible at 19 for hiring, firing, overseeing, so on and so forth. This role as part of finance to basically audit the shippers and see if they were if there were any other charges or things we needed to add. And that was my exposure to finance, and so ultimately decided to make a shift and get a degree in accounting, and then information. I had a second degree called information systems, so 2 degrees, a technology degree and an accounting degree, because I ultimately thought that would be, long story long, the best skill set to be an entrepreneur.
So were you right? Were you wrong? What if you had to do it all over again? Would you done the same thing?
I would do the same thing only because I'm happy with where I've ended up, and sort of like the butterfly effect of what would happen if I were to go back and change things. What I didn't anticipate is, so I got this accounting degree, and then I got nominated for this fellowship at the board that writes all the accounting standards in the U.S. So I took that. I ended up getting that job and moving to the East Coast, and that's sort of the only parallel would be if you graduate law school and clerk for the Supreme Court, sort of that kind of parallel. And what I didn't necessarily realize is with the accounting degree and then with that fellowship, it would be hard for me to convince the rest of the world that I know things other than accounting. So it's like, have you ever seen that episode of Seinfeld? I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I know a lot of your listeners are maybe somewhere around, I'm 42, somewhere around kind of the age where you watch Seinfeld. There's this episode where he's got like a BMW and he valets it. And when he picks the car back up, it's got this stink in it and they can't get the stink out. Did you ever see that episode? It's like a smelly car, something like that. And he ends up like leaving I think the episode ends where he leaves all the windows down and like the key in the ignition. He's hoping someone would steal it. And someone gets in the car and it smells so bad, they get out and like, no one even wants to steal this car. To me, in a way, that's how it's felt having an accounting degree and doing this fellowship where folks are like, well, you're an accountant. So how could you know other things about business or life? And they think they have a very, very, very cliche stereotype of what an accountant is. So they're like, okay, cool. You're probably like the most boring person I've ever met. Right? There's like this assumption. So I've had to try to figure out how to navigate the last 20 years of like, no, I know other things like beyond just debits and credits. And yeah, I can grow businesses and give you advice beyond just money. Like, well, are you sure? But like, what about, can't you just give me some tax tips? Like I can, but there's more to me than just tax tips. So that's been a challenge.
And I can totally understand that because like I always joke around. I have a lot of Navy SEALs that come on the show, and I'm thinking Navy SEAL, 6'5", blonde hair, blue eyed, jacked up.
Sure.
But I always tell them, all you guys look like my accountant. You guys just look normal. You don't look a certain way. Yeah. So I can understand how somebody would say, well, you start thinking, well, yeah, I'm just an accountant. No, you're way more than just of what your title is, right?
Totally. Yeah.
But now I think, especially now that I'm getting deeper into the business world, I wish I would have knew more accounting 3 years ago than I do now. I think a lot of new business owners have no clue what their analytics are or what their profit and loss is when they first start a business, right?
I mean, I talk to people who are 10, 20 years into their business and they don't know how to read a profit and loss statement, and they've never looked at their balance sheet that has all their assets and liabilities on it. And when they're talking about their taxes, then they say this year, they're talking about last year. There's a whole bunch of things that are kind of problematic that almost guarantee that they're not going to get the outcome that they want. Like, I know you want to grow a really big business because you want to achieve all these greater life mission. But absent knowing some of these foundational things, you're almost guaranteed that you won't get that.
So now when you're doing your accounting stuff and then you're doing your marketing stuff, which one is the one that got you excited while you were doing it?
Oh, 100% the marketing stuff.
So what gets you so excited about marketing? Because I'm just getting into marketing and I'm so enamored with it, learning. I love everything about marketing. So what do you like about marketing?
Yeah, again, because I have a degree in accounting and I have these CPA initials that I can put next to my name, that people are surprised at anything that I want to do that's creative. And that's a huge part of my personality and goals and dreams. In fact, like a big part of, I'm big on themes rather than New Year's resolutions. Like I'll set a theme for 2023 and it's going to be around, I haven't finalized it, but it's going to be around creativity and joy. How do I find more creativity and joy? So I'm constantly scheming, for lack of a better descriptor, on creative things that we can be doing. For example, I'm starting this social media campaign called Dan versus Social Media. And I have historically not done a lot of stuff on social media and don't have a big following there. But recently it's become somewhat of a limiting factor in terms of some of the goals that we're trying to accomplish in a few of our businesses. So I decided I want to do that. I'm willing to do some more in social media, but I don't want to do all the cliche, what I consider to be cliche posts that I think are sometimes manipulative or just feeding people more dopamine, and things that I'm kind of opposed to and what I teach in my book and our curriculum and all that. And you're taught, if you want to do things in social media, that you need to write at a like 3rd or 4th grade level. Have you heard that before?
Yep.
So what I'm going to do is I downloaded all these templates that give you this whole layout of what you should post on Mondays and Tuesdays and etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post that, like, here's your ideal schedule. Wake up at 5 a.m. Do all these things, grind your face off, go, start your hustle at 5 p.m., grind your face, things you've probably seen. And I'll post that version of it. And then I'm going to smash that post. Then I'm going to post the version that I would want people to actually see. And so I'm just having some fun with it. It's like the algorithm wants me to show you something cliche or written at a 3rd grade level, or intentionally trying to get you to evoke some dopamine and engage. So I'll play that game a little bit, only to show you what I think my people actually want to see, which is something a little bit more distinct. And they want to know what makes people extraordinary. They don't want the shorthand version. They want the extra, my people.
Yeah.
They want that. But it's hard to reach it when the algorithm's trying to serve up things that are lacking the distinction. So I'll show that. I'll smash it. I got this little intro video that I made. Then I'll show the version that I actually want to do. And that's just me having some fun with it, but also me trying to play my game. So I talk about a lot of my book and in our course, our certification program, playing your game, like leaning into your unique strengths. So me just going and posting a bunch of cliche stuff on social media, that's me playing someone else's game. I'm going to hate it. So how do I find a way to do it in a way that is fun to me, that also isn't something that I feel like I'm selling out? Or again, back to that discipline, I'm just copying someone else and I'm going to feel crappy about it. And so other areas of my life are probably going to fall apart because there's this chasm between who I am and how I'm showing up to the world.
And one thing, and I absolutely love what you're talking about, because me and Trey, this is something we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks. We're talking about how, if I'm a 5'8" white guy, I'm not going to be playing center in the NBA, and I'm not going to pretend to be playing a center NBA. But I'm a sports geek, and I like what Kobe Bryant said. He says, "Stay in your lane, but dominate that lane." And I think what we have, a lot of people, they're not being real to who they are. For me, I know in the podcast game, Gary Vaynerchuk is, he's up there, and I'm friends with him actually. But I'm not Gary V. I can't be Gary V. I'm not going to pretend to compete with Gary V. But I think that's where a lot of people get it twisted, is when they try to compete in the game that they can't win.
Yep. A friend of mine, business partner Nick Peterson, he says, you can't win a race that you don't want to be in.
Yeah.
And that's so true. Like you trying to be Gary V, or I said in the beginning of this, like I'm not a super rah-rah person, so I can't do the Gary V thing either. I can get excited and passionate about things, but I'm just not that rah pump people up type of personality. Just doesn't feel natural to me. So I gotta take my shots where I can, and again, like I said, play my game, because if I'm not, everyone's gonna know that I'm full of shit. Excuse my language. I don't know if it's okay to.
Hey, this is our house. We can say what we want to say.
All right, cool.
So then before we do that, I want to thank our sponsors. Guys, as you know, I was with GNC for over 30 years and in the military for over 23. I love coffee, but the coffee always tasted like ass, and I would never get a great rush from the coffee. So we came out with our own called Vertical Momentum Coffee. Twice the amount of caffeine, no rush. I mean, no crash. Tastes great, but 100% of the proceeds go to help veterans struggling with mental health and also homelessness. So if you love coffee with a mission, you don't have to buy Black Rifle. You can buy our coffee that's actually going to help veterans, and is actually hand roasted by veterans' hands. So if you like coffee, just write it down below, and I'll get you the information. So like I said, I love your book. Like I said, I got 15 books right now going, and I got an audio book going, but yours is at the very top of the heap. So talk to us about why you wrote your book and what was the impetus in starting it and writing it.
So the reason why I wrote the book was a forcing function for me to get a bunch of thoughts out of my head that had been rattling around for a while and kind of crystallize my thinking. So part of it was self-interested. I just want to get this down. The second piece is that back to like Dan versus social media, I feel like there are a lot of people who are in the small business space in particular who are in a lot of pain. Because when you take that journey to be a small business owner, you get crushed with scrutiny. Why are you doing this? You sure you're going to be able to do it? Why don't you just go get a day job? And often that scrutiny comes from the people who you care about the most, your family, your spouse, your friends. They're giving you all this scrutiny. And then you get expectations that come along with it. So I joke that it only took me about a decade to be an overnight success. And so all of a sudden you make it, and then people are like, oh yeah, of course you did. Or like, why wouldn't you have? Like, well, hold on, weren't you the same person who was doubting me along the way? And now you have all these major expectations? This seems like a pretty big gap here from the person who was my hater to now the person who's like, yeah, of course. So we have faced with this constant scrutiny and expectations. And so because of that, many of us fall victim to the secrets, the one step or two things that you need to be doing that will finally get your business to where you want it to be. And so we get sold all of these masterminds and marketing programs and coaching programs that kind of tell you, just bet on yourself, take out a bunch of debt, bet on yourself. By the way, that debt is to pay me for this really expensive program where I'm going to show you this one secret or two secrets that's going to blow you up overnight, right? And so we spend all this money. And then when it doesn't work out, what does that same person say? Well, oh, your mindset is wrong. The reason why you didn't get results from my program is like you didn't try hard enough, or you need to fix your mindset. And so I see this narrative constantly where business owners are in pain because they're getting so much scrutiny and expectations, and then they're trying to buy all these programs out there that are going to give them those secrets that are going to get them that success that they so terribly want, and then they don't get it, and they're told that there's something wrong with them, and then they buy the next program, right? And so they're never getting the life that they want, because what people aren't teaching you are the actual reasons why people win. By the way, one of those reasons is playing your game, right? Leaning into what you want. and a bunch of other things that I break down. But the purpose of my book is to teach people that it's not the quick secrets that somebody else has. It's you. You already have all the answers. You already have all the answers. And you go, well, that sounds like BS. I already have all the answers. Well, let me tell you why you already have all the answers. Because every question that you're asking is a preference. Should you grow your business? Well, some people could say yes, some people could say no, both people could be right. Should I work with my spouse? Should I invest in real estate? Should I, on and on and on. And the answer to every single one of those is it depends. What do you want? What are you trying to accomplish? What are your strengths? And so you're the answer. You cannot delegate that to somebody else because their preferences. So there's this really weird thing, and I apologize if I'm waxing really philosophically about this, but I'm super passionate about it. And I'm really want to help people get out of this narrative of constantly paying people to give them this one secret, and then guaranteeing that they're going to end up in ruin. So this is one of the things I'm really passionate about. Is you go into business because you wanted to change your life, maybe change your family tree. Maybe you wanted to prove to everybody else what you could do. And then what do? You look for everyone else to tell you what to do. To me, that seems like a pretty big contradiction. Right? You went into business because you wanted freedom, so on and so forth. And now you're just looking for someone else to give you this one secret. It seems like you're actually really looking for a job. Because what happens in a job, your boss tells you the one or two things that you need to do. And so it puts you on this cycle where you're not going to do something extraordinary because you're conforming to the behaviors of the average.
It makes what you're saying makes a lot of sense, because I had somebody in here I interviewed, and he does all the work for Gary Vee and also Tony Robbins, and he says the reason why we can come back to the same city year after year, decade after decade, because 97% of the people that come are not going to act upon what we teach them anyway. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to see them again next year. So I think a lot of it has to be, like, for me, as I get older, I'm 53 now, I realize that, you trade time for money. Mm-hmm. So they're not making any more time. You can make as much money, but not enough time. But I think, like you said, I think you have to figure out your why before you even try to figure out your how, right?
Yeah, I think I would say you got to figure out your solvable problem, which is, what is it that you want? What are you trying to fund? So we might have this vision board of everything that we want from our life, the six-pack abs. We want to be a great parent. We want to maybe have a vacation home. Doesn't matter to me. But what does it actually take to fund all these things that you want? So anything that you put on this vision board can be turned into a math equation. I built a tool called the Certainty app where you can take all of these things that you want and convert it to an actual equation, a solvable problem. You don't need to know the math. You can just use the app to do it for you. But we figure out, okay, for me to live the life that I want, really I need $15 million. I'm just making up a number to pay for all this. And let's calculate how far away you are from that objective. So like Google Maps, I go, hey, I want to drive over to Richard's house. Well, I'm in Seattle. Where are you at, Richard?
I'm in New Jersey.
You're in New Jersey. Okay. Well, I could put those 2 points into a map, and Google Maps is going to give me a bunch of different ways to get there. And then I go, okay, well, I want to be there tomorrow, so I can't drive. Let me figure out what's a faster route. Okay, well, I'm going to have to fly. Right? So pretty obvious in that case. Same thing with our goals in life, which is, where are you at now? Where do you want to be? And then what's the fastest path for us to get there? To me, with the least amount of effort, least amount of risk, most amount of options. Right? And so when we haven't taken what we want out of life and actually kind of turned it into this solvable problem, then we don't actually have a way of measuring how much more we need to work. Where are we actually taking the right risks? Or where are we taking too many risks or not enough risks? Where are we sort of backed ourselves into a corner where we have no options? And so we come up with this solvable problem, what we really want from life, and then we can solve for, here's how much more you actually need to be making. And then once you know how much more you actually need to be making, then you can figure out how to get there the fastest. And so that's sort of what I really try to drive home for folks, because otherwise they just think working later, taking on more clients, hiring more people is the only option when they don't even know what they need to get there to begin with. That's like me just getting in the car and driving to your house without knowing I need to be there tomorrow.
And you know, that's something because I've since I started this podcast 3 years ago, I've really started taking deep dives into mindset, you know, going all the way back into 1900s. And, you know, a lot of it is a lot of people will tell you everything that they don't want instead of telling you what they do want. You know, like they say, well, I don't want to be poor, instead of saying, I want to be wealthy. They're always talking about what they don't want. And unfortunately, you know, their RAS system, you know, you're going to get what you look for. So if you constantly are looking at what you're not going to have, you're not going to have anything.
I think you just summarized it better than I could. It's such a good point. Yeah, what do you actually want? And then once you know what you actually want, then you can figure out how to get there.
So now, like when I buy a book, it doesn't matter what kind of book I get. I want to learn something out of it, and I want to use it as a workbook. And your book is something that you can use as a workbook. So people that have gotten your book, what has their experiences been about your book? I know you don't like bragging on yourself, but I always like to hear, you know, people that are using it for and getting good results.
I have received so many messages about people, one, thanking me for being able to have a conversation with their spouse about their solvable problem, like getting on the same page about here's what we really are trying to have and what we both want. So they're getting on the same page about here's what we want out of our life. And once they're able to have that conversation in a way that's more crystallized, because I gave a framework for how to set up your solvable problem in the book, is that then they can have the real conversation about how they're going to allocate their resources. And when I say resources, I don't just mean time. I mean their energy and their time, their energy, their influence, their reputation. You know, it's not just money. So they're actually kind of able to get on the same page about where they're headed, or with their business partner, where they're headed. And then they're able to recover resources. So I've had a lot of people have reached out. They're like, hey, you know what? I realized that, because I talk about these different rhythms that we have, business rhythms, industry rhythms, personal decision rhythms. And a lot of people that go like, you know, I wish I would have learned this 10 years ago, because for the last 10 years, I've been operating, trying to spend my way out of an industry rhythm. An industry rhythm is something that you can't change about the nature of the business that you're in. So tax business, you can't change the fact that there's tax deadlines. But there are a lot of accountants who are so burned out after tax season that they spend a lot of money trying to solve a problem they can't fix. You're like, just stop doing that, because you're spending all this money that if you just were to reinvest it in your solvable problem, you would be able to get to the life that you want in the timeline that's acceptable to you. And then the last thing is playing your game, just giving people the evidence behind and all this that proves out that you need to stop trying to be someone that you're not, and just giving them permission to be weird. I mean, Elon Musk was a weird dude before he was the Elon Musk. I mean, I don't know him personally, but you read his story. Bill Gates was a weird kid, growing up. You go through the list of the people who've done things extraordinary, and they were weird kids who now we just call them eccentric because they're billionaires. And I want everyone to have the permission to lean into your weirdness. It's okay. In fact, not only is it okay, but it's going to be the thing that's going to allow you to actually do something extraordinary. And there's so much evidence that proves this out.
Now, that's something I really love because I'm a weird kind of dude, so I know I'm weird. Ask my wife to tell you how weird I am. But
I love that.
I'm a big sports guy. And one of my favorite player of all time was Dennis Rodman. Yeah. And because he rigged his game. He said he would just put a video camera just watching the rim and watching where how the balls land and how they bounce off so he can get a rebound. So he rigged his game. He knew, okay, this is what I can get away with. This is how I can play the system. But a lot of people get in the game, but not even know the rules of the game. So you can't rig it if you don't know the rules of the game you're going to join. Correct?
So true. Yeah, that's a big part of what I teach. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it's getting. That's from W. Edwards Deming. And so if you don't like the results that you're getting, you either change the system or you change your behavior. Or you can choose the third option, which is just be a victim and feel sorry for yourself. But every outcome is based off a system. I don't necessarily just mean a computer program. Mm-hmm. So if you don't, you gotta understand that system so you can get the outcome that you want. So Dennis Rodman, he understands like, hey, I'm never going to be a 3-point shooter. I'm not going to back people down. I'm not going to be the mailman, Karl Malone from his time. Like that's not my game. So for me to be successful in this league, I'm going to focus on rebounding. So what's the current system? How do I change my behavior to get more rebounds? I don't have a big following on social media, but I want to have I want to get bestseller status with my book. Well, how do I do that? Well, how do the algorithms work and how do the rating systems work? And then how do I get people to take action? Well, what's in it for them? Instead of what's in it for me, what's in it for them? So many of us don't think through that last step of, well, what's in it for someone else? Why would they want to actually go forward and buy the book? And so understanding those systems, then you can reverse engineer it and get the outcome that you actually want.
And I think that's where a lot of people fail, including myself. We don't reverse engineer. Like for me, when I first started, I just started doing podcasts and I just did it willy-nilly until John Lee Dumas said he would mentor me. And then he told me the right way of doing things. And then I had to see, well, what is, Tony Robbins, what is he doing that I'm not doing? And sometimes I think you got to go down that wormhole. You got to sometimes dig deep and find out what the successful people in your niche are doing and learn how to do what they're doing, or else you're not going to be successful. Like if you want to become a best-selling author, you kind of start watching what the best-selling authors kind of do, right?
100%. Yeah. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to go in that direction, or I'm going to try and create as much contrast as possible. And so here's how I'm going to do the opposite. So as an example, I joined an accounting mastermind years back, the biggest accounting mastermind, the most successful in the world. I'm sure a lot of people are like, that sounds terrible. But I joined it just to know what everyone else is doing so I could do the opposite. Okay, you guys here are all the things that you're struggling with, because again, to your point, you said earlier, people focus on not what they want, but what they don't want. So just hearing patterns over and over again. Here's all the things that you guys hate and you're failing at. How do I just do the opposite of that? All right, so every accountant wants to talk about the past because they're basically archaeologists. They just want to dig up the past. They say this year, talking about last year. How do I do the opposite of that? Well, how do I just become more future focused? And so in that case, I'm just trying to create contrast. In other instances, if you're trying to get a ranking or something like that, then you figure out how that algorithm works and you try to just copy it.
And well, I've had one of the ultimate disruptors. His name's Steve D. Sims. He
Mhm.
came on the show, and he
Yep.
was talking about if you're sending emails, he's sending postcards. If you're sending emails, whenever he goes to stay at a hotel, he's getting all those little thank you notes and sending to his friends around the world. So he's watching you jab, 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 and he's going to right hook instead. And
Mhm.
because, like you said, sometimes you have to be a disruptor in order to get noticed in such a busy world that we live in.
I couldn't agree more. And I just go back to I say my objective is I want to do something extraordinary. Well, that necessarily means I'm going to do something different than everyone else, right? It's extraordinary. Ordinary is what everyone else is doing. I want to do extra. I want to do more than that. Um, so what do I? So then, what do most of us do? We go. Let me join a program that tells me the one secret, and then I'm going to do that. Right now, I'm just copying what everyone else is doing. So in that case, when I'm trying to do something extraordinary and I'm copying and doing exactly what everyone else is doing, I'm just doing the ordinary, right? So to Steve's point, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
uh, I say, how can you expect to do something extraordinary copying the strategies of the average? You couldn't. So to Steve's point, when you're trying to distinguish yourself in an area where you want to differentiate, then you have to create contrast. You figure out what everyone else is doing just so you know it, so you can do something different because you want to create the distinction. So I'm doing something the thing on social media. Everyone else is posting what I consider to be sort of these cliche things. Um, how can I look similar to that? Use those templates, but then show a contrasting point of view or a contrasting way of doing it that creates distinction and plays into, oh, this is just Dan trying to rig the game again.
I love it. And so, where did you come up with the name "Rig the Game"? Because I absolutely that's why I picked up the book because like that's really interesting. As a game player, as a gamer, I want to know how to rig the game. So, how did you come up with that? What was the impetus to come up with that name?
Yeah. So backstory, I was just telling you, I've had a hard time getting people to understand how someone with an accounting degree who helped write an accounting standard could know something beyond accounting. And I realized this pretty early on in my business journey too, where I would go to these networking events and I'd introduce myself. What do you do? Oh, I'm an accountant. And again, it's like every glass in the room just shattered. There's like a screeching sound. I'm like, cool, let me go talk to someone else because you're probably the most boring person in this room, right? It's like if there's a record player that was going, there'd be a loud screech. And so I'm like, okay, this system is not working for me. So I started doing the opposite to some degree. It's like, oh, I'm a business person. Just like the most generic possible thing. Like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a business person. Like, what the F is a business person? Like, what do you mean? You're a business person? Just because it seems like the lamest thing to say, right? But turns out saying you're an accountant is significantly more lame than saying you're a business person because it's such a huge contrast. Dude, you can't introduce yourself as a business person. What do you actually do? Okay, well, boom, that's what I wanted you to ask me. I wanted you to actually spend some time asking me. Um, and if I say I'm an accountant, so then that evolved to either I'd say I'm a business person or I'd say I'm a non-conventional accountant because accountants are all about conventions. So it almost sounds like a contradiction. Like I'm a non-conventional convention. Accounting is a convention. Like, what is a non-conventional accountant? Like, well, let me tell you what that means. And so those kind of experiences led me to sort of realize that uh, I need to create a significant amount of contrast for people to ask the question, what does it mean? So for an accountant to talk about rigging the game, it's like you're not supposed to do that. When people hear rigging the game, they think it's
Yeah.
doing something illegal. But when you read the book Rigging the Game, it's about getting what you want on your terms without compromise. It's not about doing things unethical. It's about understanding that we're biased as humans, that every system is perfectly designed to get what it wants. And so rather than fighting against that, how do we set it up to actually get what we want? And so it's just about, long story long, about contrast. No one expects Dan, accounting degree, helped write an accounting standard, to talk about rigging the game. And it's about the most extreme contrast that I could think of relative to accounting.
And I love that, but like I said, I'm a sports geek, and even though I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, I always hated the New England Patriots.
Sure.
But I liked Bill Belichick because he knew that rule book in and out. He knew every single rule, and he was even making sure that it looked like he was doing stuff that was illegal, but it really wasn't. Just nobody else knew the rule, so he actually rigged the game for his benefit. And I think a lot of people they don't take the time to learn the game. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I think there's my initial reaction to it is there's two parts to it. One is you got to know the domain that you're operating against. You got to know all those rules. If you work in a marketing space, what are all the conventions and rules, and what does everyone expect? Because there are stereotypes, and what are your competitors doing? What are all those rules? But then you also go, you know what? I get to write my own rules too. I get to decide what I want this business to do, because this business and any of my investments exist to serve me. And so if they're not serving me, what the hell am I doing? Why am I taking on so much risk if it's not serving me? So you understand the rules that are out there so that you can then write your own rules on top of that. And I think Bill Belichick, in a way, he's wrote his own rules, right? He changes his defense, week to week. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to play a 3-4 or 4-3 defense, and you're supposed to stick to it. You watch the Patriots over the years, and they're notorious for, it's like, you don't want to play the Patriots after a bye week because Bill got enough time. He's going to change his defense to conform to take out your best play or your best option. And he's only able to do that because he knows the rules so well, right? It's sort of like, the rules so well that then you get to write your own rules.
Yeah. But also I think if you try to become not a rule breaker, but if you try to rig the game, could you imagine imagine the NFL draft pick gets pick number 1. They start interviewing. The first question they ask him, well, what is your goal to being a football player? He says, well, I can't wait to go get my gold jacket in a Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
They'd be like, what do you mean? You're just supposed to be some rookie getting ready to play. Yeah. But in his mind, he's already getting the gold jacket. So he's pretty much rigging himself up for success in the future if you have that kind of long-term mindset, right?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that.
All right. So now last question is, how do we find you? How do we support you? And how do we get your book? Where's it available?
Yeah, so you can you can find me at riggingthegame.com. That's got all links to social media and to my podcast and links to the book and all of that. Probably the easiest place to get the book at this point is Amazon. Which is just rigging. Just go to Amazon and search "Rigging the Game," or in fact, you could type in riggingamazon.com and that'll redirect you to the checkout page. So hopefully, the book gets so big at some point that Amazon sends me a letter like, "Hey, you can't own riggingamazon.com." Well, make me an offer, Amazon.
Yeah, they just don't know the game yet. So maybe you're gonna have to teach them that game, brother. I'm so grateful that we finally got to hang out, and Trey couldn't stop bragging about you, and everything you said was right, bro. You're amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was an absolute pleasure for me. I had a lot of fun. I love the American flag in the background, so I appreciate you for that. I appreciate the work you're doing with the coffee and all that, so thank you.
I love it. So, guys, make sure you pick up the book. Like I said, I'm on my third iteration. Make sure you pick up the book. He's very easy to get in touch with, so make sure you get in touch with him. And guys, remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up. And I will catch you guys tomorrow. Brother, have an amazing week. And I can't wait to see what you got coming up next, because I know you're going to crush the game.
Well, I appreciate that. All the best to you too and everyone who's watching.
All right, brother. God bless.
Yeah, you too.